Hashirale, everyone. Homage to the Bhagavan Lord Buddha. Sangye Chomdende La Chakselo. Today, I would like to continue sharing with you from the King of Glorious Sutras called the Exalted Sublime Golden Light Mahayana Sutra. Let's say the mantra for accumulating merit and try to set a strong Mahayana motivation of bodhicitta to benefit all sentient creatures by our reading and what we learn from this sutra. So let's say the mantra. This is the more Sanskrit pronunciation of the mantra. Tadyata Om Dare Dare Bandare Svaha. 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 You might hear Tibetans pronounce this mantra somewhat more like Teyata Om Dare Dare Bendare Svaha or Soha. So Teyata Om Dare Dare Bendare Soha. 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 But whichever way you pronounce this mantra, according to the Tibetan or the Sanskrit orthography, maintain that strong motivation that you are learning this not simply for your intellectual edification or to prove how smart you are, but to benefit sentient beings along the path of the Bodhisattvayana. So today, I would like to share with you about this glorious Devi, Sarasvatī Mahadevi, a profound Ishtadevata of Buddhism in the Tantrayana and in the Mahayana. And I want to share what I will call a Sādhanā of Sarasvatī from the Suvarṇabhāsa Sutra. Suvarṇabhāsa is the older name of the Golden Light Sutra, so we can use them interchangeably. The Suvarṇabhāsa Sutra or the Sutra of Golden Light, the Golden Light Sutra, whichever you prefer. And within the Sarasvatī Parivarta, or the chapter on Sarasvatī from this glorious sutra, there is effectively a very short sadhana or liturgy that you can do to this goddess. So let us see what we learn from the glorious sutra. The first piece of this sadhana is what we will use as the invocation, and it is more technically the shorter praise to the goddess Sarasvati of Brahmin Kaundinya. So remember that at the end or towards the end of Sarasvatī Parivarta, which in Tibetan versions is chapter 8, and in the Sanskrit translation is usually chapter 7. At the end of this chapter, or Parivarta, there is a praise that the Brahmin Kaundinya, who has been an interlocutor in the sutra before, a praise he gives to the goddess Sarasvati. So first, let's look at it in Sanskrit. Sarasvatī Mahadevi Pujaniya Mahatapa. So this means Sarasvati, the great goddess, or the great goddess Sarasvati. Pujaniya, she is worthy of worship, or she is reverend. And Mahatapa, she possesses great asceticism. She has great tapas. Usually we don't think of Sarasvati Devi as being a ascetic, but in this praise she is. So if we wanted to give this some melody, I suppose we might say something like Sarasvatī Mahadevi Pujaniya Mahatapa. But that is only one half of the shloka, so let's continue. Vikyata sarvalokeshu varadata mahaguna. So famous in all worlds, a giver of boons, gifts of great virtues or qualities. So, Vikyata sarva lokeshu varadata mahaguna. So let's start from the beginning. Sarasvati Mahadevi Pujaniya Mahatapa Vikyata Sarva Lokeshu Varadata Mahaguna. Shikare Samashrita Kanta Darbachi Varavasita. So dwelling on a high peak, very much like an ascetic, extremely beautiful, and clad in a garment of darba grass. Darba vastram darayanti ekapadenatishtati. Wearing darba grass clothing, she stands on one foot. So it is almost as though she is dancing like a dakini. Sarva deva samagamya tamuchur vachanam dvidam. So all the gods or devas have assembled and spoke these words to her. Jivam vimuncha sattvanam vashantu vachanam shubham. And we ask the great goddess, let loose the tongue of beings and let us speak a fine speech. This is why I think we can use this praise as an invocation to this Devi, because fundamentally we are asking Mata Sarasvati to allow us to speak the Dharma and to speak the words of truth. So let's start at the beginning again and just sing through the invocation if you wish to use this invocation in Sanskrit. Sarasvati Mahadevi Pujaniya Mahatapa Vikyata Sarva Lokeshu Varadata Mahaguna Shikare Samashrita Kanta Darbachi Varavasita Darbhavastram Darayanti Ekapadinatishtati Sarva deva samagamya tamuchur vachanam dvidam jivam vimuncha sattvanam pashantu vachanam shubham. All right. And now let's see this praise, this short praise of Brahmin Kaundinya in Tibetan, if you would like to say this invocation in Tibetan. And you will see the meaning is a little bit different, but is largely the same. Plamo chen mo yang chen cho o katub che. So the great goddess Sarasvati, which in Tibetan is usually translated as Yang Chenma, is worthy of worship, and she is a great ascetic. So Sarasvati in Sanskrit means she who flows, because Sarasvati Devi was in the Vedic times the river Sarasvati, and Yangchen means she who possesses melody. So, Jikten kuntu namdrak chogjin yonten she. A great mine of virtue, you bestow supreme boons in all worlds. Serne zema darwa sayi gekupa. Supremely beautiful, you stand on one foot. Even though this part of the shloka is actually translated on the next slide. Darwa sayi gegyon kangpa chikine. So you can see in the word darwa or darba, the word taken over from the Sanskrit for darba grass. Planam tanshe lakne dike chemete. All the gods gathered here ask you thus. Senche nam la gewe siksho che trolchi. Let loose your tongue, speak fine words of virtue to beings. So we are still asking Sarasvati to open the mouths of beings that they may speak a fine speech. But in the Tibetan, it is more clear that we are also asking Yang Chen Mahlamo to speak words of virtue to us, to herself preach the holy Dharma. And it is this that the goddess does when she gives us the Dharani in a little bit. But let's start at the beginning again. Lamo chen mo yang chen cho o ka tup che. Jik ten kun tu nam drang chok jin yon ten she. Serne zema darwa sa yi ge kupa. Darwa sa yi ge gyong kang pa chi kene. Lanam tan che lakne di ke che me te. Senche nam la gewe tsik sho che trolchi. So we have invoked the great goddess Sarasvati in words that the Brahmin Acharya and Vyakarana Kaundinya, who prophesied the Buddha's enlightenment at his birth. We now will recite the Dharani, or the mantra, the spell that Sarasvati teaches in the Sutra. Now, this version is as it is transcribed in the Tibetan recension, the 21 chapter Tibetan recension of this sutra. But scholars of this Sublime Sutra have reconstructed the Tibetan Dharani. So in order to honor the Kanjur and to show the way it is transcribed in the Tibetan scripture, I will pronounce it a little bit as though I were a Tibetan trying to pronounce the Sanskrit with some quote-unquote mistakes. And more importantly, we will see that in this version of the Dharani, Sanskrit titles and Tibetan prayers are sort of mixed. And we'll see when we read through the Sanskrit what this is really sort of saying and what this might mean. But first, let's go through the Dharani as we find it in the Tibetan. Sayadyate dana muritsire awadze awadzawate hingule mingule pingalabati mangushe maritsi samati dashamati adri madri taratsi taratsi pati sitsiri shirimiri maritsi pranaye Loka dzieste, loka shreshte, loka triye, sidi trite, bima lamuki, shutsi kari atratihate, atratehate bude. Namutsi mahadebi tratidrina napmakaram. Daki lo tokpa me pargyuchik, tensho dansik suche pegyudang. Deno dang nyeng ngak la sokpa da kirik, ngak ngodrup tu gyurchik. Teyata mahatrababe hili hili mili mili. Chomden de mahla mo yang shengi, tu dak namper gyalwer gyurchik. Karate keyure keyurawati, hili mili hili mili hili hili. Sangye ki dempadang, che ki dempadang, gendun ki dempadang. Wangpo denpadang, shuhle dempe la mo chen mo gukpa jao. Gang dak jik den na dempa, mawa de da ki dempa dan, dempe tsigi la mo chen mo gukpa jao. Teyata hili 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 mili hili mili. Daknam pargyal war gyurchik, shom den de mahla mo chen mo yang chen la chak selo. Dakla Sangha Ki Siknam Drupar Gyurchik Soha. Now let's look at the reconstruction of this Dharani from the Sanskrit by Lokesh Chandra and by Catherine Ludwig. Tadyata Mure Chire Avaje Avajavati Hingule Mingule Mingulavati Mangushe Marichi Samati Visamati Agri Magri Tarachi Tarachavati Chichiri Siri Miri Marichi Pranapriye Lokajeshte Lokashreshte Lokapriye Sidavrate Bimamuki Suchichari Apratihata Buddhi Namuchi Mahadevi Pratikrena Namaskara Mamukasya Mama Buddhi Darshihi Sarvasatvanam Buddhir Apratihata Bhavatu Shiva me Vishudyatu Shastra Shloka Mantra Pitaka Kavyadishu Tadyata Mahaprabhave Hili Mili Vicharatu me Buddhir Amuka Buddhi Shuddhihi Bhagavatyam Devyam Sarasvatyam Karate Keyuramati Hili Mili Avahayami Mahadevi Buddha Satyana Dharma Satyana Sangha Satyana Indra Satyana Varuna Satyana Yeloke Satyavadina Tesham Satyana Satyavachanena Avahayami Mahadevi Hili Mili Vicharatu Amuka Buddhihi Namo Bhagavati Mahadevi Sarasvati Sidyantu Mantrapada Me Swaha. So we can see that this Dharani is very much a prayer to the great goddess. So if you want to think of this as a prayer rather than a Dharani, you can do so. We see that the reason why this Dharani is long and somewhat complicated is that we invoke the great goddess by a variety of names. And whether or not we know what these names mean, we are invoking them, and these are parts of the Dharani that do not really get translated because they are invocations of proper names, which are not the same as most words, and so we translate them a bit differently. For example, Chichiri Sirimiri or Sirimiri, this seems to be part of many Dharanis, these sort of sacred sounds or syllables whose meaning we may no longer have or understand. And so these we also do not really translate. But some of these names do also have meanings, like Prana Priye, one who is dear or beloved to Prana, the breath of life, or Loka Jeshte, the eldest in the world, Loka Shreshte, the best in the world, or Loka Priye, the beloved of the world, or dear to the world, Sita Vrate, whose vow is accomplished, Bhima Mukhi, of frightful face or countenance, Shuchi Chari, of pure conduct, we see prayers for an unobstructed consciousness and for the unobstructed consciousness of all beings. So we can see, again, may my intellect be unimpeded, let the intellect of all beings be unobstructed, let my welfare grow perfectly pure in studying the Shastras, the Shlokas, and mantra collections, the poems, and so on. So some of these parts that have a clear meaning in Sanskrit have been translated more directly into the Tibetan, as opposed to some of the names that are not as clear. But we can tell, I think, that the Dharani ends, as many mantras or most mantras do, with Svaha or Soha. So whether you choose to say the Dharani in the mix of Sanskrit and Tibetan, to be reading it out of the word of the Buddha, which is a wonderful practice, you may do that. I personally prefer to recite the Dharani as I have memorized in Sanskrit according to the scholarly reconstruction. Now, after you say this Dharani, so let's say the Dharani again, just for the sake of accumulating the merit. Tajata Murechire Avaje Avajavati Hingule Mingule Mingulavati Mangushe Marichi Samati Visamati Agri Magri Tarachi Tarachavati Chichiri Siri Miri Marichi Pranapriye Loka Jeshte Loka Shreshte Loka Priye Sida Vrate Bima Muki Suchi Chari Apratihate Apratihata Buddhi Namuchi Namuchi Mahadevi Prati Krena Namaskara Mamukasya Mama Buddhi Darshihi Sarvasadvanam Buddhir Apratihata Bhavatu Shiva me Vishudyatu Shastra Sloka Mantra Pitaka Kavyadishu Tajata Mahaprabhave Hili Mili Vicharatu me Buddhir Amuka Buddhi Shuddhi Bhagavatyam Devyam Sarasvatyam Karate Keyure Mati Hili Mili Avahayami Mahadevi Buddha Sachena Dharma Sachena Sangha Sachena Indra Sachena Varuna Sachena Yeloke Satyavadina Tesham Sachena Satyavachanena Avahayami Mahadevi Hili Mili Vicharatu Amuka Buddhihi Namo Bhagavati Mahadevi Sarasvati Sidyantu Mantra Padame Svaha. So, now, once you have recited the Dharani as many times as you wish, I would recommend starting with 1, 2, 3, maybe 7 or 21 recitations of the Dharani. Since it's quite long, it'll take about a minute to recite. So just keep that in mind for your sadhana practice. But like the end of many deity practices, let us end by saying a longer praise to this goddess, also by Brahmin Kaundinya. Jumpo sok nam tam she nga la nyem pargi. Hla dang driza hla wang che pejik tena. Bhume dampa hla mo choki rab gang yin. Hla mo dampa chok tu ze pe jalato. Yonten nampa na sok sak pe yen lak yen. Yang chen she ja chen ni yang xing se nambar. Drime ye she yonten nam ki nampar gye. Rin she na sok ta de ta bu ta we chir. Chok rab nga ki yonten kye par de to do. Dampa chogi ngodrup jepa dang, yang dak dang yonten jepa dang, drime chok dang pema barwa dang, mik chok dang ni miki dampa dang, gewe ne dang gewa tongwa dang, yonten samdu mepe gempa dang, dawa dradang drima me dang. Yeshe jungne drenpa dampa dang, sengye chokdang mila jompa dang, lakpa gyenam kini gempa dang, tawa nyawa tabir nangwa dang, yidu ongwe ngakdang yang nyen dang, sherab zamo dang ni dempa dang, gochok drubje semchen dampa dang, Hla dang hla mi wangpo che pa dang, hla dang hla min soku ne jo dang, jungpo soki ne tak cho pe chir so ha. Tak chak la mo di la chak ja o, dakla yun ten kyepa kun solchik, gopa kun tu dakla ngodrup sol, dranam trona dakla taktu sung. All right, let's go back and just say this in English. O you hordes of Bhuttas, listen to me. I will sing praise of the virtues of the sublime goddess with a supremely immaculate face. She is the chief of goddesses, the finest among sublime women. In the worlds of gods, Gandharvas, and Asura lords. She is adorned with limbs embellished with numerous virtues. Called Sarasvatī, or Yangchen, she blazes with merit. Her eyes are broad. She is fully endowed with pristine wisdom's virtue and resembles an array of precious jewels. I praise the virtue of her supreme eloquence. She gives the supreme boon of sublime, perfect mantras and qualities. Immaculately pristine, she is like a blazing lotus. Her eyes are holy and incomparable. Source of virtues, she sheds light to see virtue. She is adorned with inconceivable qualities. Her light is bright like the moon, a mine of exalted wisdom and cool mindfulness. She is the finest lioness and vehicle for humans. She is adorned with 8 arms and appears like the fully waxed moon. Possessed of profound wisdom, she has a beautiful voice and enchanting song. An excellent being, she helps accomplish the highest goals. Honored by the lords of gods and asuras, she is celebrated among divine deva abodes. And in the realms of Bhuttas, she is continually worshipped. Svaha. I bow down to this goddess. May she grant me an exalted heap of virtue. May she grant success in every venture, and in the midst of my enemies, always protect me. So there also happens to be a verse explaining the benefit of this praise in the Glorious Sutra. So let's complete with that. Yige zokshin sogi di dakni, nang parlang ne sang marja parja, sampadang ni nordru tanshenye, ngodrub gewa gyachin to pargyur. If one arises in the morning and clearly speaks these words in full, every syllable complete, all wishes will be granted, one will find wealth and grain, and obtain immense virtue and every success. So we have the invocation of Brahmin Kaundinya to the goddess Sarasvati. We have the noble or sublime Sarasvati Dharani taught by the great goddess herself in pursuance of her promise to Lord Buddha in the Sutra of Golden Light. And after the Dharani, we have praise to this goddess by Brahmin Kaundinya and the excellent benefit of this praise. So I think that we can use these resources to accumulate the merit of reciting the noble Sarasvati Dharani. May we do this, and may this goddess, this enlightened wisdom deity, bring us to Samyak Sambodhi, or Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, pure and perfect and peerless enlightenment. So let's make our dedications. May whatever merit is generated by the recitation of these verses be dedicated to the awakening of all sentient beings. May a special share of the merit be dedicated to Johannes Nobel, who lived from June 25th, 1887 to October 22nd, 1960, whose academic work made this work of devotion possible. May a special share of the merit be dedicated to Ronald Eric Emmerich, who lived from March 9th, 1937 to August 31st, 2001, whose academic work made this work of devotion possible. May a special share of the merit be dedicated to Losang Dawa and Prodz Okter Skiervo, scholars and Lotsawas of this sublime king of sutras, who I believe by the Buddha's grace are still living. May a special share of the merit be dedicated to Catherine Ludwig and Lokesh Chandra, scholars and Lotsawas of the sublime king of sutras. May any mistakes in the definite sounds, letters, and words of this sutra be forgiven by the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and the Great Goddess Sarasvati herself. May the four heavenly kings uphold their commitments to the Tathagata, that the Sutra of Golden Light may last long in Jambudvipa to benefit sentient beings. Please like and subscribe if you rejoice in this sutric sadhana, or this sutra recitation, and would like me to post more Dharma videos like this. And please leave a comment to rejoice in this recitation, or to make aspiration prayers or corrections or confessions, or offer other suggestions. I am not a native Tibetan or Sanskrit speaker, so if either you have a comment on how you would pronounce the Dharani or other parts of this sutra, I would love to hear. And leave a comment also if you would like to request prayers in pujas or recitations of the sutras. Tashi Dele.